Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. I made 2 episodes of this podcast yesterday on the conviction of former U.S. President Donald J. Trump. This is a third episode on the same general subject. I addressed different aspects of it in those 2 episodes yesterday. Here, I will basically be making a follow-up to the second episode, where I expressed some degree of caution and advised people against making provocative statements, against either panicking if you are on the right, or against celebrating if you are a progressive. And as I said, since I am a commie, I really don't care in that sense. I'm certainly not panicking in that way, and I'm not celebrating either. Honestly, it really does not matter to me who gets elected president in November of this year. Um, Nobody that I would support would be elected. Plus, to be honest, I have never in my lifetime voted for a president. Because I necessarily have anything against the electoral process, although maybe I do, but I don't think that it really means anything significant because the capitalist world system needs to come apart. Whether I vote for a particular candidate and that candidate wins or loses is to me irrelevant. I simply don't care about that aspect of it. What I talked about in the second episode yesterday was my concern about possible violence, possible domestic terrorism erupting from the MAGA, the Make America Great movement, as a result of the conviction, multiple convictions of Donald J. Trump. And I said that we should, I hope, attempt to avoid stirring up emotions. We should try not to attack Trump, but instead show sympathy for his family. After all, they are human beings. Whether you or I or anyone else agrees or does not agree with them on one issue or another is to me irrelevant. We need, in my view, to practice what in Sanskrit is called metta, what in Pali is called metta, what in Sanskrit is called maitri. And to me, that implies being ever mindful not to say anything that will offend people, especially people that we don't like politically, that you may not like, that I may not like, that somebody else may not like, because after all, it does not really matter. The main thing is working toward a time through conscientization when the capitalist world system will collapse, and hopefully then the third and fourth worlds, or at least portions of the third and fourth worlds, will be able to organize revolutions leading to the establishment of revolutionary socialism or communism. So to me, that's the objective. I really don't care about the conviction of a former president. Whether he deserves it or not is something for you to decide and for me to contemplate. But it is not something that I really care enough about to really devote my time to. What I care about is that you and I and everyone else does not make this problem worse. And making the problem worse by intensifying the contradictions of capitalism intentionally is not, in my view, a very good strategy. The dialectic works on its own. It does its own work. It has its own timing. It is a force of nature, a causal mechanism of nature. And what it does is the business of the dialectic, not my own. So I have faith that the dialectic and that portion of the dialectic commonly called karma, or cause and effect, will play out, and that things will work to the advantage of all of us ultimately. Perhaps that is assuming that we do not destroy ourselves first through climate change or nuclear war or something else like that. And that is, again, part of the reason why I emphasized the importance of caution. We do not want to provoke people to act violently. Nobody wants to see anybody killed unintentionally. That is not something that we need to do. In other words, I am not what is commonly called an accelerationist. An accelerationist is somebody who believes in accelerating the contradictions of capitalism to bring about socialism or communism as quickly as possible. There is no need to do that, and I think that can easily backfire and perhaps even slow down the progress of the pace toward revolutionary socialism or capitalism. And I am only speculating. But here's the follow-up. I did emphasize that there was certainly a chance of domestic violence or domestic terrorism as a result of the guilty verdicts that the court came to yesterday. And that story has not gone away. What I said was only my own speculation, but rightly or wrongly, sadly or not, my speculation has turned out to have some merit. I was hoping it did not, because I don't want to see people hurt. I would like to see communism or socialism established without anybody being hurt. And I think that is possible. Revolutions do not require violence. Revolutions for communism may generally include violence, and I sometimes find it hard to imagine how communism or revolutionary socialism will exclude violence. But still, I do not want to be in the position. I do not want to take the responsibility for anyone getting hurt. Because to me, at that point, the burden shifts to me. And I am as guilty as the people who engaged in domestic terrorism. So again, that is not something that I want to do. It is not something that I want on my conscience. I have a strong moral compass, and I want to live by that compass. A part of that includes meta or maitri. That's what I will leave it at for now. But again, the story that has developed since I made that second podcast yesterday is that there genuinely is a threat of domestic, I should say, domestic terrorism. Yes, domestic terrorism. I think I said domestic violence before, which means something quite different. So let me go ahead and read for you either all or a portion of this article from Reuters. It is a very good article. It is titled, Trump Supporters Call for Riots and Violent Retribution After Verdict. The authors are Joseph Tanfani, Ned Parker, and Peter Eisler. Dateline, May 31st, 2024. And that is today. It was updated just 4 hours ago. So it is a recent article. This is current news. Okay, here's the story or parts of it. Supporters of former President Donald Trump, enraged by his conviction on 34 felony counts by a New York jury, flooded pro-Trump websites with calls for riots, revolution, and violent retribution. After Trump became the first U.S. president to be convicted of a crime yesterday, his supporters responded with dozens of violent online posts, according to a Reuters review of comments on 3 Trump-aligned websites: the former president's own Truth Social platform, Patriots.win, and the Gateway Pundit. Some called for attacks on jurors, the execution of the judge, Justice Juan Merchan, or outright civil war and armed insurrection. Pause there for a second, please. It is important not to overreact, not to become unduly emotional, not to start screaming and complaining. But at the same time, one needs to take these threats seriously. That may be a difficult balance to achieve. I realize that it probably is for most people. For me, as a sociologist, I am used to working on achieving that balance. But most people are not social scientists. And so responding negatively, provoking violence, yelling and screaming, going onto social media, threatening individuals on Trump-aligned media is not a very good tactic in my view. Continuing. Someone in New York with nothing to lose needs to take care of Judge Merchan, wrote one commentator on Patriots.win. Hopefully, he gets met with illegals with a machete, the Post said in reference to illegal immigrants. On Gateway Pundit, one poster suggested shooting liberals after the verdict. Time to start capping some lefties, said the Post. This cannot be fixed by voting. Again, pause for a second. I really wish that people did not refer to progressives as lefties. I mean, people can do whatever they want, but I am a lefty. I am a leftist, as a Maoist third worldist, as a communist, a revolutionary socialist. The people that they are calling lefties, I assume, are not people that I would call lefties. I wish they would simply say progressives or social democrats. But obviously, I have no control over their vocabulary. But it concerns me for a number of reasons. And one is the safety of my comrades. My comrades are not making any threats of violence. And so there is an importance, I think, in using a balanced tone, especially because of statements like the one I just read. Because by using a balanced tone and then making it clear that one is a communist or a revolutionary socialist of some tendency, then one is making it clear that not all quote unquote lefties are looking to hang former US President Donald J. Trump. I think that is a very important thing for communists and revolutionary socialists to do. Again, this is my advice for communists, not for progressives, because I assume that progressives will continue to do what they have been doing for several years, and that is making blatant attacks on President Donald J. Trump. Threats of violence and intimidating rhetoric soared after Trump lost the 2020 election and falsely claimed the vote was stolen. As he campaigns for a second White House term, Trump has baselessly cast the judges and prosecutors in his trials as corrupt tools of the Biden administration, intent on sabotaging his White House bid. His loyalists have responded with a campaign of threats and intimidation, targeting judges and court officials. This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt, Trump told reporters afterwards, echoing comments he often made during the trial. Pause for a second. One thing to keep in mind, I don't know how much of Trump's comments, his attacks on the judge, his attacks on jurors, got to those jurors. Supposedly, they are not supposed to get that kind of information, but that is assuming an ideal world, and we do not live in an ideal world. I don't want to live in an ideal world. I want to live in a real world. And in the real world, that is not how things generally work. I have known of a lot of cases where disparaging comments made about the judge and jurors have gotten to the jurors. And so, if that is the case, Trump may have actually produced his own convictions. That is a real shame, but I don't think that President Trump is aware of it. I wish he were, but there is nothing really that anybody can do. He does what he sets out to do, and I guess that's about the end of it. A 12-member jury found Trump guilty on yesterday, of falsifying documents up to cover up a payment to silence a porn star's account, Stormy Daniels' account, of a sexual encounter ahead of the 2016 election. Sentencing is set for July 16th, days before the Republican Party is scheduled to formally nominate Trump for president ahead of the November 5th election. Trump has denied wrongdoing and is expected to appeal. Pause. Yes, Trump will almost certainly appeal. No attorney worth his credentials would do anything less than that. Now, I should say, as I mentioned yesterday, that appeals of these kinds of verdicts are usually unsuccessful, meaning when somebody has been convicted of a crime, especially multiple verdicts against that person, the appeals court will usually ignore or dismiss the request for a reconsideration. But remember, we are not dealing with an average person. We are dealing with a former president of the United States. So this is entirely new territory, and none of us have any way of knowing exactly what an appeals court will do. On Truth Social, he called Merchan highly conflicted and criticized his jury instructions as unfair. One commentator responded by posting a picture of a hangman's platform and a noose with the caption, "Treacherous mobster of the justices system." Jacob Ware, a co-author of the book God, Guns, and Sedition, Far-Right Terrorism in America, said the violent language used by Trump's followers was a testament to the former president's ironclad ability to mobilize more extreme supporters to action, both at the ballot box and through violence. Unless and until he accepts the process, the extremist reaction to his legal troubles will be militant, said Ware, a research fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, pause again. Unless and until he accepts the process, who thinks that that is going to happen? I don't think anybody really does. Whether Ware does, I can't read his mind, but I think it is highly unlikely that former President Trump is going to accept the electoral process in the United States. Trump has no record of doing that, and I see no reason to believe that there will be a change in that direction. But nonetheless, that is what this individual says. Continuing, a spokesperson for Truth Social, which again is the social media platform established by Trump after he was kicked off of Twitter, now called X. It's hard to believe that Reuters, once a respected news service, has fallen so low as to publish such a manipulative, false, defamatory, and transparently stupid article as this one, purely out of political spite. Of course, this article that I'm reading now is from Reuters as well. So I think it shows us a degree of integrity on the part of Reuters for actually putting that in the article. Continuing, all three sites have policies against violent language, and some of the posts were later removed. Representatives of Patriots.win and Gateway Pundit did not immediately respond to requests for commentary. A Trump spokesperson also did not respond to an email seeking comment. After Thursday's verdict, many of Trump's supporters said that his conviction was proof that the American political system was broken and that only violent action could save the country. 1 million men armed need to go to Washington and hang everyone. That's the only solution, said one poster on Patriots.win. Another added, Trump should already know he has an army willing to fight and die for him if he says the words, I'll take up arms if he asks. Pause. We know that the MAGA movement has been in decline. The rallies that used to attract many, many people overflow gatherings at Trump's political rallies have now seen little more than a trickling. And again, that indicates that the MAGA movement, like all social movements, has gone into a period of decline and perhaps is soon to end. But a new movement or a renewed movement may have been started as a result of Trump's convictions. So I would suggest do not be surprised if we see a return to the heyday of the MAGA movement. Maybe it will be called something else. I don't know. Perhaps. Maybe it will still be called MAGA. But things like this, when the hero of a movement has been convicted, attacked, or in some cases killed in certain countries, often will reinvigorate, revitalize a movement. And I see no reason to think why that might, emphasis on might, not be true this time as well. We don't know. Maybe it will not be. Let's all hope that there will not be that kind of violent action, or if, heavens forbid, there is violent action, that it intensifies the contradictions of capitalism, leading to the collapse of the capitalist world system and the first world which rules over it. Back to the article. Other posts specifically urged targeting Democrats, in some cases, suggesting they be shot. America fully destroyed by Democrats. Lock and load, wrote a commentator on Gateway Pundit. While the posts identified by Reuters all called for violence or insurrection, most fell short of the legal standard for a persecutable offense, which typically requires evidence that the comment reflects a clear intent to act or instill fear, rather than simply suggesting a frightening outcome. Still, one researcher who studies extremist militias said the guilty verdict could inspire violence by reinforcing a conviction among some of Trump's supporters that he's a victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by his enemies. I do think a lot of these folks have been looking for an excuse to maybe mobilize for a while, said Army Cooter of the Middlebury Institute of International Studies Center on Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism. I hope I'm wrong. I've said for a long time, though, that I would not be shocked to see violence result from a guilty verdict, either directed toward the jurors or others connected to the case. Pause for a second. I hope that the privacy, the anonymity of the jurors will be protected. I hope. I don't know. A lot of times the court will try to do that, but then they will fail, especially in very high profile cases. Word will get out on who the jurors are, sometimes through neighbors. Neighbors going and saying, well, I think my neighbor was a juror in this case. So things can get out in often unexpected ways. I hope that does not happen for the sake of those jurors and their families, but there is no way to know. Obviously, Merchan, the judge, his identity is open, and I assume that he has 24-hour surveillance protection. At least I hope he does. That is the end of the article. It is a nice, succinct article explaining what the current situation is. Again, I want to re-emphasize the importance of not overreacting, not going onto social media, attacking Donald Trump. That will do no good. If you are a communist or a revolutionary socialist, the important thing, in my view, as a Maoist third worldist, is to try to inspire people in the third world and the fourth world to prepare for a possible revolution or revolutions to establish communism or revolutionary socialism. Here in the first world, the most I think that we can do is engage in resistance. But resistance means trying to protect people, not to inspire hatred, not to inspire attacks on MAGA people, for example. That is not resistance. That is, I would say, the opposite of resistance. That is actually participating in a campaign of terrorism oneself. So I would say, if you want to engage in resistance, the resistance should be toward the attempts or the possible attempts, we don't know, at violence by people in the MAGA movement or whatever new movement might emerge out of the Trump convictions. Not an attack on Trump, not an attack on his family, and not an attack on the far right in general. That will simply do no good. On the other hand, analyzing the far right, analyzing, breaking it down, explaining what is the far right? Why does the far right exist the way it exists right now? Why is there so much hatred and hostility being expressed toward what that one person called lefties, which I would call progressives? Why? Well, I mean, we live in a very divided country, those of you in the United States, and I assume that perhaps where you are, it's the same kind of situation. The world itself is very divided, but especially the US. And the US is the most violent, industrialized country in the world. And the people who are most likely to engage in acts of violence are people on the far right. So we need to be aware of that. We need to protect ourselves, to watch where we go without panicking and without stirring up trouble. Again, that is my suggestion. And also, as I said, to express sympathy for the family of Donald J. Trump. Sympathy. That can do nothing but lessen the tensions. For the time being, this has been Mark. by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.